How often do you think about the price of your rent? Is it becoming a burden? These questions encapsulate the reality for many middle-class Americans today. Once upon a time, becoming a homeowner was a staple of the American dream. It was a symbol of stability and success. However, we're seeing a drastic shift from home ownership to renting among the middle class. The reasons are varied and complex, but they all boil down to a single word: affordability. Financial burdens are hindering the path to home ownership. The specter of increased debt looms large, with student loans, credit card dues, and other liabilities weighing heavily on household budgets. Soaring housing costs, fueled by a volatile real estate market and rampant inflation, have made buying a home an unattainable dream for many. This financial strain is driving an unprecedented surge in middle-class renters. Today, almost 43 million families across the country live in rented apartments, marking the highest level in history. There's been an 82% increase in households earning between $56,000 to $100,000 per year opting to rent in the past 5 years. The landscape of housing in America is changing, and not for the better. The dream of owning a home, once a rite of passage, is becoming a distant memory for the middle class. Instead, they find themselves trapped in a cycle of renting, with affordable housing options dwindling and rent prices soaring. The implications of this shift are far-reaching, affecting not just individual households, but the very fabric of our communities and society. The middle class, traditionally seen as the backbone of the American economy, is being squeezed out of the housing market. The American dream of owning a home seems to be slipping away from the grasp of the middle class. The question is, can we turn the tide? Or is the dream of home ownership destined to become an unattainable illusion for the middle class? Only time will tell. It's not just that more people are renting. The cost of renting is also skyrocketing. The average rent in the United States today is over $1,000 higher than it was in 2020. That's a substantial leap in a short span of 4 years and a clear sign of a rental price boom. This rapid escalation of rental prices is not a regional phenomenon. It's a nationwide crisis. From the bustling cities on the East Coast to the laid-back towns in the Midwest, and all the way to the sun-drenched landscapes of the West Coast, the story is the same. Rent is becoming increasingly unaffordable for a significant portion of Americans. Now, let's bring the middle-class renters into the picture. These are individuals and families who earn decent incomes, yet they too are feeling the pinch. Over the past decade, their incomes have declined by 9%. Yes, you heard that right. While the cost of renting a home has been on a steady climb, the incomes of middle-class renters have been on a downward slope. The combination of rising rents and declining incomes is a recipe for financial instability. Middle-class renters are finding it harder and harder to keep up with the cost of living. They are caught in a financial squeeze that is becoming tighter with each passing year. So, what does this mean for the future? Well, it's a bleak outlook. If the current trends continue, the gap between income and rent will only widen. More middle-class families will find themselves unable to afford the cost of housing. The dream of a comfortable life, once within their grasp, will start to slip away. The cost of living is on the rise, but incomes are not keeping pace. This is the harsh reality that countless middle-class renters are facing today. And unless we take action to address this rental price boom, the dream of affordable housing will remain just that, a dream. Scene script. Rent isn't just a number. It's a significant part of a family's budget. How much of your income goes towards rent? Picture this. Nearly half, or 46.3% of middle-class renters are either moderately or severely burdened by housing costs. What does this mean? Well, if you're moderately burdened, you're spending more than 30% of your income on housing. And if you're severely burdened, that figure jumps to over 50%. Yes, that's right. Half of your income, just on your rent. Now, let's add some context to these numbers. Let's take a trip across America and look at the median rents in some of our major cities. In Boston, for example, the median rent is $2,680. That's a 24% increase from just 3 years ago. Hop over to the West Coast, And in Los Angeles, you're looking at a cool $3,000 for rent. And in our nation's capital, Washington, D.C., the median rent is $2,600. These aren't just figures on a page. These are real prices that real people are having to pay, month in, month out. And for a growing number of middle-class Americans, these prices are simply out of reach. In fact, a staggering 70% of homes are out of reach for first-time home buyers on middle incomes. That's 7 out of every 10 homes. So what we're seeing isn't just a shift. It's a seismic change in the way we live. The American dream of owning a home is becoming just that, a dream for too many. And the reality? It's a struggle to keep a roof over your head without sacrificing other essential parts of life. For many, the cost of housing is becoming an insurmountable burden. Why are rents rising so dramatically? It's a simple case of supply and demand. Let's dive into this a little deeper. On one hand, we have a high demand for rental housing. There are several factors driving this. For starters, we have an exploding millennial population. These young adults are moving out, starting careers and seeking affordable housing. They're not quite ready to buy homes, so they're turning to rentals. Then we have baby boomer retirees. Many are downsizing, selling their family homes, and moving into smaller, more manageable rental properties. And don't forget about the limited access to mortgages. Even those who want to buy homes are finding it harder to do so. Tight lending standards and high down payment requirements are pushing more people into the rental market. On the other side of the equation, we have supply, or rather, we have a lack of supply. New residential construction simply isn't keeping pace with demand. Builders are focusing on high-end properties, leaving a gap in the market for affordable rentals. This imbalance between supply and demand is exacerbating the housing affordability crisis. It's leading to what's known as the missing middle. This term refers to middle-income renters who are increasingly being priced out of middle-income neighborhoods. They earn too much to qualify for subsidized housing, but not enough to afford escalating rents in their communities. The result? A market that isn't meeting the needs of middle-class renters. With demand outstripping supply, rents are being driven up. And with no relief in sight, the problem is only set to worsen. The housing market is a complex beast, influenced by a myriad of factors. However, the principle of supply and demand is a fundamental one. And right now, that principle is highlighting a serious issue. Middle-class renters are caught in a precarious position, squeezed by high demand and limited supply. Unless we address this supply and demand imbalance, rents will continue to rise. And the dream of affordable housing will remain just that, a dream tasked for many middle-class Americans. The market isn't meeting the needs of middle-class renters. The impact of this housing crisis extends far beyond the wallets of renters. When housing costs soar to such astronomical heights, it's not just about having a roof over your head. It's about the other essentials that get sidelined. Imagine having to allocate more than half of your income to just housing. It leaves a pitiful amount for other necessities. Households caught in this housing cost burden are spending significantly less on food and health care. They're spending 41% less on food. Think about that. Almost half of what they could potentially spend on feeding their families gone. And health care? They're spending 71% less. In a world where health is wealth, this trade-off is a ticking time bomb. But the ripple effects of unaffordable housing don't stop at individual households. It's a chain reaction that's leading to systemic poverty and inequality. Middle-class individuals, unable to afford homes in their income bracket, are occupying apartments meant for lower-income individuals. It's a domino effect. The high earners occupy the middle-income homes. The middle earners occupy the low-income homes. And the low earners. They're squeezed out, left with a lack of affordable housing options. This isn't just about being priced out of a neighborhood or struggling to make rent. It's about the societal fabric that's being torn apart by this crisis. It's about the widening gap between the haves and the have-nots. It's about a future where the American dream is nothing more than a relic of the past. So, when we talk about the housing crisis, we're not just talking about prices and percentages. We're talking about people, about families, about communities. The housing crisis is more than a financial issue. It's a societal issue. This crisis isn't going to solve itself. We need to take action. The housing and rental crisis we find ourselves in today is not just an economic issue. It's a reflection of a society that has lost sight of its priorities. A society where the dream of a safe and affordable home is slipping further and further out of reach for the average American. A society where the middle class, the backbone of our economy, is being squeezed out of their neighborhoods, their cities, and their dreams. This crisis is a symptom of a larger disease, a broken system that prioritizes profits over people, growth over sustainability, and short-term gains over long-term well-being. We've seen the consequences of this system play out in our communities. We've seen the strain on families struggling to make ends meet, the stress on individuals working multiple jobs just to keep a roof over their heads, the despair of those who have been priced out of their homes. But this is not the end of the story. We can rewrite the narrative. We can take a stand against unaffordable housing, and we can demand policies that prioritize affordable housing development, that protect renters from predatory practices, that make home ownership a viable option for more Americans. It's time to speak up for affordable housing because everyone deserves a place to call home.